The Isle in the Silver Sea. Chapter 8 Vina. The crown has always been one with the eternal queen. There were no rulers before her, and there shall be none after. To claim differently is to court death. When you next travel to Nonsuch at her pleasure, I advise you to hold your tongue. Source: correspondence between Lord Arthur Wincroft and Lewis Spencer, deceased, archivists ruling destroy. No further investigation required. Would the spy master forgive her for making a mess of her unspoken quest if she told him there had been extenuating circumstances? A murderer in a forest, a dead incarnate, and the other half of her tale, the witch, threatened by a collapsing inky woodland, and a pale-eyed man who watched her with malevolence, and something else Vina couldn't place. A knowing maybe. Vina could not have planned for any of it. Vina had been a victim of circumstance. There had been no easy way to collect the witch, Simran, she corrected internally. No easy way to collect Simran. Simran had been angry and rightfully wary, and she'd shown no sign of softening in all the hours she'd been stifled in the carriage alongside Vina. Simran had responded to every prodding question from the archivist with silence, her back ramrod straight, her lips as thin as a knife cut. The carriage itself was dark with the curtains shut, gloomy, and oppressively silent. In the thin facets of light that broke through the gaps in the curtain, Vina examined Simran's face, which was turned to the side, showing Vina her profile. A sharp jaw, sharp cheekbones, a strong nose, a lovely mouth, and dark brown eyes. Simran's expression was stony. Vina couldn't help but look at her, and remember how incandescent she'd been in the woods. She wondered what small spark would set Simran ablaze again. Vina couldn't help but wish for it. Anything to break the brittle cold of her, that still face. The archivist tentatively cleared her throat and said, "Sir Lavinia, I have some questions for you." Vina wrenched her attention away from Simran. "Of course, darling," Vina said, with a languid smile. "Ask me anything you like." The archivist stared at her, mouth thinning with displeasure for a moment, before a veneer of politeness swept the contempt away. Vina bit back her own laugh. Laura and her father had tried to teach her how to charm and make polite conversation. Politician's wife conversation, Laura had called it dryly, but Vina had taken those lessons and quickly learned how to irritate rather than soothe, anger rather than calm. Sometimes charm wasn't enough. Sometimes Vina had to be an ornery little shit, for the good of all. "No questions?" Vina said innocently. "I can tell you need to relax. Let your hair down a little more. I know an excellent pub in Waterloo." "No," the archivist cut in through gritted teeth. "We need not talk now. Later, perhaps." Vina looked at the witch again. Simran was still sitting straight and tense, but her mouth had softened infinitesimally. There was little time left to mull the fate awaiting them. They were almost back. Vina knew the jolt of those London cobblestones, as they crossed the London Wall into the ancient city proper, and she knew what it meant when the cobbles smoothed, the carriage moving onto the path that led to the royal palace itself. They came to a stop. Vina did not think of golden deer, as bright as phosphorus lamps, bounding through the trees. She did not think of the man who'd murdered incarnates and murdered a forest. Instead, she thought of the expression she'd need to wear when the carriage door was wrenched open. And there the door went, flung open by a witch hunter's careless hands, letting the cool night air in. Vina schooled her expression into something suitably contrite, a crease between her brows and no smile on her lips, and offered Simran her hand. Simran did not look at her. She slunk out of the carriage, landing lightly on her feet. Vina followed after her, all her bones aching as she unfolded from the cramped position she'd held all the way back home. She wasn't used to being still for so long. Beyond the gloom of the carriage, the evening was somehow painfully bright, painted with torchlight. Awaiting them under the golden light of the courtyard stood a coterie of archivists, robed and solemn. At their head waited an austere man, with blonde hair, that Vina did not recognize by face alone. But she recognized his clothing, the grand chains of not-worked gold at his throat, and the chatelaine at the waist of his robe, weighed down by vials of ink and a feathered quill of beaded silver gold. A senior archivist. No, the head archivist, keeper of the great tomes of the Isle, Apollonius Roland himself, if he was here. Then finding the witch had been more vital than anyone had admitted to Vina. And Vina was, quite thoroughly, fucked. The spy master stepped forward, face cold and forbidding. "Knight," he said, voice pure frost. "You were forbidden from leaving state grounds, by royal orders." Embarrassed men were dangerous men. But Vina was ready to be the spy master's scapegoat, and danger didn't frighten her as it should. She bowed low, hand to her heart, and said, "I am sorry, sir. My past self came to weep at my door. I could not resist my tale. I had to obey." Her voice wavered appropriately. I will take any punishment the state sees fit to lay upon me. In this I followed my heart, but I failed my duty. She spoke with as much sincerity and feeling as she could press into her words, and heard the witch snort faintly, derisively behind her. Archivist Roland gave a booming, indulgent laugh. These incarnates, he said. They can't be helped, they're always off gallivanting. At least these two are now accounted for. He patted the spymaster on the shoulder. No need to thank me, of course. We're here to support you, my friend, whenever the Privy Council falls short. The spymaster's face somehow grew even more pinched. Mira, Archivist Roland said, come here. He crooked a finger, and the archivist she and Simran had traveled with walked to his side. Sir Lavinia, said the spymaster. His gaze flickered to Simran. Witch, he said, the Queen is expecting you both. Follow me. The whole group of them, archivists and spymaster, witch hunters, and watching guards, swept toward the steps of the palace. At the entrance, the witch hunters were barred. They protested loudly, but they were soon left behind. This was going to be a formal audience, Vina realized. Simran's formal audience. They were walking along the main corridors of the palace toward the White Hall, chandeliers twinkling above them, plush carpet beneath their feet. I can't see the Queen, Simran said, voice thin, looking for the first time not furious or stony but nervous. Why not? Vina asked gently. Simran said nothing for a beat. No doubt Simran had heard all sort of stories about the Queen, of her hair blazing behind her like fire when she rode into battle, of the petty love games she played with her courtiers, of her luminous beauty, her terrifying temper, her joy in bear baiting and fox hunting, her love for good marchpane and glorious balls, of her power, aisle wide and aisle deep. The Queen was the most ancient incarnate tale of all, and her bones were the bones of the Isle, her heart its very life. I suppose she's just a woman, Simran said finally. No, Vina thought. Ah no, she's not just that, but no warning could truly prepare Simran. And there was no time for it now anyway. They were at the White Hall. Great doors were thrown open. At the circular table before the throne sat the Privy Council, robed and silent. On her unassuming throne sat the entirely assuming Eternal Queen, surrounded by her flock of ladies-in-waiting, raven-haired and masked in vizards, ovals of concealing black velvet that only left their eyes bare. They were all utterly silent, which was no surprise. Their masks were held in place by a bead clenched between their teeth, maintaining their muteness. At her side she saw Simran pause, blanching in shock, before steadying. Vina felt a pang of sympathy. Even the hardiest folk were thrown the first time they saw the Eternal Queen. The Queen's face was porcelain, inhumanly white, unlined, rossamithed, and glassily blue-eyed. Her face would have been doll-like if it hadn't been so animated, mouth curving into an enigmatic smile as she beheld them, her winged eyebrows drawing together as she examined her visitors, then smoothing as she leaned back. Her hair was red, vibrant, a mingling of copper and rose, somewhere between blood and fire. Her gown was expansive, white, and her neck was surrounded by a ruff like a white halo, glittering with a frost of diamonds. Even if she had not looked as she looked, her presence was overpowering, a cloying, warm fragrance of hazel and nutmeg that mingled with rosewater that scented the room. She smelled like the incarnate she was, the flesh that grew from an old, vast, and deep-rooted tail. She was so distracting that it was almost possible to miss her behemoth of a pet coiled loosely around her throne, her ladies-in-waiting, and the steps that led to the throne. Her beloved pet was a wyvern, two-legged and two-winged, its scales of burnished gold, and its snout long, barely concealing serrated teeth. It would have looked like a frightening beast indeed, if it were not collared with a velvet black collar like a small dog, and if it were not snoring faintly, asleep with its snout at the Queen's feet. Vina bowed, and after a moment Simran followed suit. As the entire hall rippled with genuflection, there was a long silence. Then the Queen leaned forward with a rustle of silks, a coo of delight. We have not seen you for decades, witch, the Queen murmured. Her voice was rich, musical. To see you alongside my dear knight, to know your tale is safe in the cradle of our hand, it is glorious, truly. How well you suit one another. Her gaze fixed on Simran. We have seen this knight many times, and marveled at her womanliness and exotic blood. Why not a witch of similar oddness? She laughed, and her women rustled, clinking with teeth-gritting laughter along with her. Strange. But incarnates are incarnates, are they not? They do not adhere to traditional morality, we understand. She crooked a finger. Step closer, she commanded, and both Simran and Vina did so. Closer, the Queen urged, and one of her ladies-in-waiting drifted down from beside her throne to guide them to the Queen's feet. The Queen placed one pale finger beneath Simran's chin, raising her head to examine her. Simran stared back, transfixed. Has your tale begun? Has the night hunted you yet, dear witch? Bow in hand, arrow cocked? Her eyes creased into a blue smile. I don't understand, your majesty, Simran said, voice tight. No then, said the queen. She released Simran abruptly, waving her hands about in an airy fashion. You will stay with us. You will dine with us. A week of feasting. You will entertain me, regale me with tales, and then a ball. The courtiers cheered, clapping merrily. The queen smiled back at them, beatific. I can't, Simran said, but the sound of clapping courtiers had turned her voice small. I need to leave. My friend. Vina touched Simran's arm. Simran's head whipped to face her. You can't question her, Vina whispered. Not here. The look Simran gave her was viperous, and betrayed. But Vina stared back, unflinching. Simran had to understand her. This was a warning. Vina had lived in this palace since she was young. She knew what the queen was capable of. When Vina was first placed before the queen as a child, and felt the queen's rose-scented hands on her chin, she had been entranced. She'd wanted to love the palace. Laura had told her to love her purpose, so she'd tried. That had lasted until the day a courtier had displeased the queen. Traitorous words written to a lover had been discovered by archivists, who sifted through letters, just as they examined coffeehouse papers and books. The courtier had been brought before the queen, where he'd begged and groveled, and kissed her dainty slippers, and she had smiled at him, beautiful as ivory and rose, and told her wyvern to eat him feet first. It had. Vina did not often think of it. It had been horrible, to be sure, but there was no escape from it. Her tail was her cage. It was a nice cage, as they went, and the bars of her tail would follow her no matter where she tried to run. The queen clapped her hands before Simran could say anything more. The queen stood, and her audience bowed as one as she and her women left the room in a rustle of silks and perfumes. Lavinia, said the spymaster, when the queen was gone, and their audience had risen from their bows. With me. Simran was being led away by a guard. She didn't look back at Vina. Vina turned and followed the spymaster. He took her to a small salon, decked in powder blue settees. The windows were open onto the black night. He shut them officiously, then turned back to her. Now, he said, tell me what happened. She told him everything. Everything, apart from how she'd almost let Simran go. That had indeed been a foolishly noble impulse. Better to keep it secret. What did you tell the archivist? Nothing, sir. Good, good. She'll report your every move to Roland, of course, but at least the damn man won't have your words. Sir, said Vina, the killer of incarnates, what is to be done about him? Nothing that concerns you. A woodland died because of him, said Vina. 2 tales I know of have been lost. But I know there must be more. This is an emergency, sir. A catastrophe for the Isle. If I can help, you can help, Lavinia, by doing what the queen wants, and keeping your thoughts to yourself, the spymaster said coldly. Do you understand? A beat. Vina inclined her head. Apologies, she murmured. Your father has sent you a message, he added. It will be in your room. Head there directly. When you're not dining at the queen's pleasure, that's where you'll remain. Understood, said Vina. She'd go mad being so inactive, but what could she do? She was followed by a guard to her room. When she closed the door, she waited a breath by the entrance, until she heard the telltale click of a key. She was locked in. The message from her father was on the table. It was on his official stationery, headed with the sigil of Parliament. The letter was a simple thing, an admonishment for how her behavior had harmed his standing. A minister cannot have an incarnate child who strays from their duty. It urged her to remain on state grounds. You could have come, and told me yourself, thought Vina. There was also a letter from Laura. This was neat, delicate script on flower-scented paper. Her letter was softer, cajoling. Don't be hurt by your father, dear Lavinia. He was terribly frightened for you. Look after yourself. I'll keep him safe. She placed the letters back on the table. She lay back down on her bed, and thought of phosphorescent deer, and a pale-eyed man, and Soren dead. What a curious and dreadful business. Someone had to find answers if the queen and commons alike were unwilling. She could bide her time. She was good at that. The dinners were excruciating. Long mahogany tables were laden to the point of ludicrousness with lush feast after feast, honey apples, and suckling pig, cockentra sewn together with neat thread, but no less grotesque because of it, and roasted rabbit, garnished with apricots and pearly onions. Courtiers filled every available seat, elbowing one another for space in their ridiculous finery. No other knights or incarnates were invited, so Vina and Simran were on their own, seated on opposite sides of the table, where they could look but not speak. Fantastic, truly. It left no way for Vina to explain herself. She was trapped staring at Simran, who refused to look back, and instead picked at her food in stony silence. The queen in the largest seat with her wyvern curled about her, was the one who spoke the most, regaling them with tales of her nigh unimmortal adventures. Simran sat to her far left in a stiff-necked borrowed gown, her hair bundled into a gable hood, pearls wreathed around her throat, and her expression a rictus of simmering rage. She had a lady-in-waiting on each side, guard dogs in black masks. She tried to run then, Vina hadn't expected any less. Vina, in her doublet, her resignation, could only stare at her, and say, wait, bide your time with her eyes alone. That night, the queen was relating how she had crossed paths with the Laidly Worm, a small incarnate tail she had crashed into on a fox hunt. It was Apollonius's predecessor, who warned us the worm was no simple beast, but part of a tale that breathes life into an array of crags in the north. And to think we would have cut her down. She laughed merrily. Poor girl, ensorcelled into the form of a worm until her brother could break the curse upon her. Certainly our lance would have been no replacement for his brotherly kiss. What would we do without our dear archivists to advise us? Her Majesty would have seen the truth a mere moment later. Of this I'm sure. Apollonius protested, oily and smiling. Her Majesty is, after all, the greatest of all incarnates, her vision and knowledge are unparalleled. The queen smiled graciously as if to say yes, this was indeed true, and Apollonius was correct to say it. A great tumult of compliments followed. Buoyed up, the queen continued boasting, indeed we have hunted far greater prey since. You cannot envisage what we were at the ritual of the royal hunt, garbed in armor that shone like moonlight, high upon our white horse. She sighed, reminiscing. It was the winter solstice. The spirits were high. We sought a wild hunt, she said, naming a ritual hunt that fell at the liminal times of solstices and equinoxes, when the magic of spirits and fire was at its greatest, and renowned hunters sought out mythical prey in order to feed upon their power. We hunted a whisper of a great beast prowling the ancient primordial forest, a cockatrice perhaps, or another form of worm, whose venom and wickedness filled the minds of all who gazed on it with ugly terrors. It is the duty of a monarch to hunt great beasts, and so we did. All night we chased, but we found only our dear wyvern. No venom in her, though her teeth are sharp indeed. We fought, but we chained her to our will soon enough, and now she is our dearest companion. She petted its great head, nestled on her lap. Its eyes were dull, its scales glossless. It made no sound, and did not move at her touch. Not for the first time, Vina felt pity well up in her heart. How trapped the creature looked. How sad, to see such a beast at the queen's feet. She looked away, gaze sliding toward Simran once again. With a start, a shock, she realized that this time Simran was looking back at her. They shared a moment of perfect understanding, the same pity, the same frustration, the same disgust. Then Simran's look hardened with judgment. Look at what happens right in front of you, her expression said. Why have you never done anything about it? Vina looked away first, shame in her belly. The balls held at the royal palace were lavish beyond all belief. Vina had attended her first soon after being found out as an incarnate. She'd worn a stiff dress, flat at the bodice in the style the queen favored, her hair piled on her head in plaits beneath a veil. She'd loathed that entire candlelit banquet and formal dance, as she'd stumbled through steps as the adults watched her with curious eyes. This child incarnate trust in velvet and gold. But now she was an adult, and although she couldn't avoid probing eyes, she had more control over some things than she'd once had. Her appearance, for one. Her doublet was unadorned by ruffles, plain velvet stitched with silver, broad at the shoulders, and whittled at the waist. In front of her small bathroom mirror, she wetted her short hair, and combed it until the curls fell in a pleasing shape. She changed her earrings from gold to silver to match. It was enough. The banqueting hall was warm, scented by the pine smoke of open hearth fires, the ceilings high, and wooden floors polished to a gleaming shine. The walls were covered in tapestries of great incarnate tails, dragons with lustrous green scales, and women in coned hats, serpents and warlocks, great giants and wolves vaster than houses. She avoided looking at them. Instead, she looked at the throng of nobility in the hall, the great lords and ladies all dressed for the queen's pleasure in her preferred clothing, ruffs and gowns, doublets and hose. The candlelight was warm on their milling figures, the air smelled like rosewater and cardamom. Among them stood a few alien figures, gowns at a closer glance woven from rose petals, imps, dryads, figures with faces of exquisite beauty. If I were here, she thought of Soren and all her unanswered questions, tracking one figure with her eyes as she did so. A dryad perhaps, her hair woven into a long braid of leaves. And her companion, a tall figure, with a long fall of golden blonde hair, power radiating from their form, like light. The beginnings of a plan began to form. Vinny, a voice said. It was Matthias, concern and sympathy in his eyes. So, he said after a pause, well, it begins. How do you feel? Vina smiled. Have a wine for me, she said. Get one for Edmund too if he's here. He's here. He doesn't want to talk. She didn't stop smiling. That's fine, she said lightly. I'll corner him another time, I'm sure. She grabbed her own glass of spiced wine from a silver tray. One drink would do her no real damage, and would make this whole business more palatable. She downed it, lowered the glass back down. As she did so, a chorus of trumpets erupted, and the nobles bowed low and graceful as the queen swept in and took her seat at the high banqueting table, raised above the room. That was Vina's cue. She was moving even before a harried maid began to walk over to her, summoning her with flapping hands. The floor before the banqueting table was bare of people, waiting. The knight and the witch, a herald announced, and Vina stepped forward with a breath, a smile. Vina knew keenly that a tapestry of the knight and the witch hung in this room. That golden-haired man, and that palely blonde woman swooning in his arms were stitched into cloth behind the queen's seat, their bodies surrounded by a circle of blood. The pale witch could not have been more different from Simran, who was being harried to the center of the hall by two ladies-in-waiting. Simran's brown skin glowed in the candlelight. Her expression was flat and unreadable, her bones sharp, her arms crossed. She was angry and beautiful, like a sharp blade, to be held with reverence, moved with skill. Vina's throat felt dry. Simran wore her hair in a simple black braid. Her gown was stiff brocade, but entirely black, copper embellished where Vina's was silver, as if they were twined together by the language of cloth, not just their shared tale. Vina stepped forward and took Simran's hand in her own. Simran stared back at her, defiant and cool, but under the surface Vina could see her panic. Either she had not been told what to do, or she had forgotten. First, bow to the queen with me, Vina said in a low voice. She turned and bowed, Simran mirroring her. The queen smiled, raised a hand. A lute began to play to a slow and mournful rhythm. Then we dance, said Vina. Dance, Simran repeated. Is this necessary? Her voice softened to a whisper. This ball, this stupidity, all of this, what is the damn point? Monarchy is a performance, Vina said, smiling, always smiling. Few would be able to read her lips, and after so long unable to speak to Simran, it seemed important to tell her this. It needs balls and feasts and thrones and crowns to survive. We are food for her power. We dance to serve. She could feel the prickling heat of all those eyes on her, the wine in her belly. Think of us as a dancing bear, here for entertainment. Have you ever danced the pavane? Fuck no, Simran said under her breath. Follow my lead then. She raised Simran's hand in her own, feeling the light, warm weight of it. The pavane has been danced 1,000 times here in this hall, she whispered, as she began to turn, a slow and stately motion. The tail of it will guide you where I can't. It was a solemn thing, this dance. Vina circled Simran. Simran moved with her whispers, and with the tug of the subtle tail threaded into the floor, the air. When their hands touched again, she felt the absurd warmth of sunlight on her hair, so distinct from the hearth fire's warmth. She smelled rustling green leaves. She could see from the widening of Simran's eyes that she had too. Others joined them, beginning the steps of the pavane, mingling on the waxed wooden floor. Their hands were still joined. Vina forced herself to let go. Is it enough? Simran asked. Can we stop now? It's enough, said Vina. Good. Her mouth firmed. We should talk. I agree, said Vina, relieved. Finally. Simran hesitated, moving to speak, then paused, turning her head. Damn, she said. The ladies in waiting were swiftly bearing down on them. Now that the dance was done, they won't leave me alone, Simran muttered. I've already tried to escape twice, but they won't look away. Twice. Are you surprised? Truly? Simran's eyes snapped to hers, full of familiar fire. No, said Vina ruefully. It surprises me you didn't try more times. All the tools of my magic were taken. They'll be returned to you when our tale begins, I'm sure. Simran's expression grew suddenly pinched. Vina knew her words had been no real comfort, and perhaps the opposite. She winced internally. The ladies in waiting came over to take Simran each by an arm. They led her away. Vina watched for a moment. Then, realizing how many eyes were on her, she loosened her posture. She went to seek out another drink. She drank one mouthful for show, then carried the rest of the glass out with her into the gardens attached to the banqueting hall. There were a few figures already standing out in the moonlight, laughing quietly, and kissing in the shadows. Vina sauntered past them into the maze that filled the garden, crafted out of roses and thorns. Inside it, she kneeled and carefully poured her wine into the earth. She held her breath, the moon looming above her. A gift to the ground could summon any waiting Fae, but Vina was sure there was only one that would seek her out. A libation to the soil. Knight, how kind of you to summon us in the traditional manner. She raised her head. A dryad and a Fae stood suddenly before her. The dryad wore roses and green braids within her hair. The Fae was beautiful beyond comprehension, radiating the same power they had when Vina had first spied them across the room. But that beauty was typical of their kind, and did nothing to move Vina's heart. My liege is Alder, said the dryad proudly. They serve in the House of Lords, integral to the leadership of the Isle. You should be honored to have them answer your call. You could tell, often, from looking at a Fae whether they were ancient and worthy of respect. This one wore a diaphanous gown of blue beneath a cloak of silver, flowers in their golden hair. Their authority undeniable. I am honored, Vina said, standing, and bowing deeply. You're looking for one of my kindred, the Fae said. Their eyes were as green as grass, lividly bright. I feel the desire on you. I seek the merciless maiden, Vina admitted. My friend, the knight of her tale is dead, murdered by a killer of incarnates. Something is rotten on the Isle, fair liege, and I must put it right. I hope she may have answers. The Fae hummed, a light and thoughtful noise. You are not the first, and will not be the last to seek out the maiden. Your house of mortal ministers has been wroth at the Fae courts keeping her from them. They cocked their head. You have seen this killer? I saw the man, Vina admitted. I saw him kill another incarnate. If you cannot introduce me to the merciless maiden, then all I seek is information. I fear my own tale is in danger too. She swallowed. Tell me what the man is. Liege of the Fae. Tell me what I face, and how he can be killed. Their eyes glittered, amused and curious. I cannot tell you exactly how to defeat him, or all that he is, they said, but he is old and canny, and known to us. We can tell you a secret we have not even told the commons, the queen, the ink pushers in the tower. We can tell you a secret that could lead to his destruction. Will that suffice? Yes, Vina said. Come then, they replied. Follow me into this labyrinth, knight. I am a liege of the House of Fae, and I can give you what I have no desire to share with your mortal ministers. We will bargain. Vina hesitated. And what must I pay for the knowledge I seek? The Fae's smile lengthened and deepened, and they answered.